Hey guys, what is up? This is Alex with Fishing MN. Today we got a how-to video basically setting up a slip bobber on a spinning reel that is using braid. Now, slip bobbers and bobber fishing have been around for a very long time, and honestly they can be probably the best and most effective way to fish sometimes. Main reason why is because you can get that live bait basically eye level with these fish once you find them, and sometimes that's exactly what they want. But today we're basically going to show you how to set it up and what you need. Now, setting up slip bobber on braid is just a tad bit different in my opinion. Realistically, it's almost the same as any other type of line choice. So if you're using mono, if you're using fluorocarbon, you could probably do it the same exact way. This is my personal favorite way to do it on braid. I found this to be the most successful. So let's get into it. Let's first go over the parts you need, or the lures and whatnot you need to make a slip bobber, and then we'll just go ahead and rig one up. Alright, so the first thing I wanted to talk about right off the bat was basically the reel and rod of choice. Now, what I have here, and it's going to be hard to show, I just have a normal rod with a it's a Pflueger Supreme spinning reel. It is wound up with 10-pound braid. I believe it is spider wire, and so it's 10-pound braid. And the main thing I want to talk about with slip bobbers is actually the eyelets of the rod here. You can kind of see in the camera there, basically all these eyelets are pretty big. That is, in my opinion, very crucial for slip bobbers, because once you put that tie on the line, you want to make sure that it doesn't get caught up in the eyelets. And so you really don't need any type of fancy rod. The problem with a lot of rods nowadays is a lot of them come with very small eyelets. So if you have any rod laying around that has decent sized eyelets, that would be my number one choice. I would honestly almost care less if it's a $10 rod or a $200 rod. If it has decent sized outlets and it's in good condition and the flex that you want it to, that would be my choice. Now we're going to switch to the GoPro now. We're going to go over the slip bobber components, and then we're going to rig one up. Alright guys, so I got my little computer desk here kind of rigged up to show the components needed for slip bobbers. The first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need slip bobber ties and the beads that go along with it. So these can be found basically anywhere. This is just a large pack. I think there was like maybe 50 of these. I rig up a lot of slip bobbers, especially in the ice fishing season. So this is definitely well needed, but inside the bag there is little tiny beads as well, and those are also crucial for your slip bobber. The next thing you need is your actual slip bobber. My personal favorite is this Phil Wobble Bobber. It is rated here, you can see, at a, well, maybe you can't see, but it's basically a ½ ounce max type of bobber. So when you're rigging this up with a weight or a jig, you're going to be using something in the ballpark of a ½ ounce. But the cool thing about the Wobble Bobber is that when this is sitting down, it basically, in the water, it will always constantly wobble like this. That helps give a little bit more action to your live bait rig, and it works fantastic. And the colors are nice too, easy to see. The next thing that you're going to want here is wobble bobber, don't want to stay. Okay, that just goes to show how much it wobbles. So the next thing you're going to need here is some rolling swivels. These are made by VMC. This is the size 6. It's rated for a 55-pound test, but we're not using anything in that ballpark. But these are really convenient to have. What we're going to use this for is we're going to use these to combine braid and the mono or fluorocarbon leader that you're going to use. The next thing that you're going to want to choose is your hook. Now, I have found that just a normal jig like this, I believe this is a 1/4 ounce, I believe. I found that these work probably the best for the situation because you do not have to add any additional weight. You don't have to add split shots, you don't have to add any type of inline weights. You can just have the jig and it works like a charm. If you are going to go with something a little bit more traditional, you could go with something like this. This is basically a size 6 small hook. We use these a lot in the Bonja waters. These work good too as well, and so also a good choice, but you would have to rig that up with some type of weight. The next thing that you want to do is you want to have some type of mono or fluorocarbon, preferably in the ballpark a 6 to 10 pound test. This is just 6 pound test mono. I have a crap ton of this stuff, and so this is what we're going to use for our leader. Now this is why it's a little different to rig up slip bobbers on braid, is because when you're rigging it up braid, anytime you rig up braid, you have to use some type of leader. You don't have to, but I've noticed that over time it helps catch fish because braid can actually be seen by fish easier. And so your monofilament is going to be more clear, your fluorocarbon is going to be clear, your braid is not. And so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to make a mono leader. And so now we're just basically going to get into it, and we're going to start rigging it up one by one, and then we'll show you the final result. All right, so I got my braid here. This is on my reel. I got a lot of slack pulled out on it. But what you're going to do is you're going to take the braid and you're going to start by putting on your knot. So we're basically going to take one of these knots out of the bag, and then we're going to take one of the beads. Once you got your knot and your bead ready to go, put the bead aside, make sure it doesn't roll away. We're just going to put it there and hopefully it doesn't roll away. And you're going to take your knot here. Now for the most part, most of these knots on slip bobbers, they're not going to have a direction that they come off, but some do. This one here, it has kind of a fray here. I don't think this is necessarily directional, but we're going to be putting it on this way through the line going through there, and then we're going to push the knot that way so that we miss that burr. So we'll take our braid and we'll just go ahead, we'll put it through this plastic tube that it has on there, and I like to take it and I just like to pull a couple times, and then I'll take it and we'll remove the tube. Alright, so basically what you're going to have now is you're going to have this knot on the braided line. Now before you tighten this knot down, what you're going to want to do is you want to get this wet. Now if we had the time and case to do so, you could have a little tiny bowl, just dip it in the water, and that would be good enough. In this case, we're actually going to, well, as bad as it sounds, we're going to put it in our mouth. We're going to get it wet with our saliva, and that way we can tighten it down, makes a better connection. We got it wet now. Now we're going to pull it tight. So now that we got it tight, you got these long leads here. What I like to do sometimes is I will actually take a pliers of sorts, and if I don't have another set of pliers, I'll put one of these ends and bite down on it. But you're going to want to get this as tight as possible. And so these knots here do not always work the greatest on braid. So definitely experiment with the type of braid you have, with maybe different ties if it doesn't work very well for you. But this here, it's pretty much on there pretty tight. It's not going to be perfectly tight, but it's going to be fine. Now for the sake of the example, I'm going to leave these ties on here. I will naturally cut them down a little bit, but not much. Just enough so it doesn't catch too much in the rod. But you want to keep them long because you're going to tighten them throughout your day and throughout the time that you're fishing. Now that we got that done, let's go back to our end here, and we are going to put the bead on. So now that we got our bead here, we're going to poke the braid through the bead. Just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep pulling this until we get down to our knot and just kind of leave it there. Now we'll go back to our end here, and we will take our wobble bobber and we will put that on. Now just a quick thing, I wanted to talk a little bit more about this bobber. If you can see this here in the GoPro, you actually have I think it's a brass grommet here and a brass grommet there. This is actually one of the only bobbers that I can find where you actually have the grommets on both sides. A lot of times slip bobbers will have it one on top but not on the bottom. The reason why these are really crucial is because over time, whether you're using braid, mono, or fluorocarbon, they can actually make grooves inside the bobber. When you have these grommets here, you don't have to worry about the grooves. That makes it so that the line can flow super easy through the bobber, and that way you don't have to worry about always having to kind of pull your line back and forth to get that line to go through the bobber. All right, so there we go. We got the braid through the bobber, and again, I'll pull it again and leave it here. So now that we have it here, you can kind of see a good example of how the slip bobber works. That tie basically stops. The bead basically adds a little bit bigger of a stop to it, so that way the bobber stops like that. Now that tie you can adjust throughout the day depending on the depth that you're fishing, and that's what makes slip bobbers one of the best ways to fish. You can adjust your depth throughout the day. You can go shallow, you can go deeper, and not have to rig up anything additional. Guys, so now that we got that situation done, we're going to take this and we're basically going to set it aside for now. We're going to completely set that aside. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our swivel situation. The reason why we're doing these swivels is because it is a super easy and convenient way to basically combine monofilament and braid together. Now, there is specific knots that you can use to do this, and you can go that route too as well. Me personally, I have found these to be the best because you're ensuring your favorite knot on these swivels instead of basically putting all your faith in a knot from braid to mono. That knot can work just fine, and I'll post here exactly what knot that is, but I just like this better. So I'm going to take one of these swivels here, and one of my favorite knots is the Palomar Knot. And so we're going to rig up the Palomar knots using the monofilament first, and then we're also going to do that knot using the braid. Now you can use a different knot to do this on where you don't need to worry about pulling line back through a knot, but I like the Palomar knot. It's my favorite. So we're going to take some trilene monofilament and we're going to add it to our swivel. Alright guys, so I have our mono here. It is approximately, give or take, about 2.5 feet long, give or take. You can go as much as you want or as short as you want. I think anywhere from 2 to 4 feet is good enough. So we're just gonna go ahead and tie the monofilament onto the swivel. And there we go. We have our knot on the swivel. So we're gonna just gently pull each end here and make sure that that knot is solidified. And there we go. There's our swivel with monofilament. We'll go ahead and we will snip off the excess. And now the next part that I do is I actually tie the braid onto the swivel using a very similar knot. There we go guys. Now we got our braid and our monofilament tied together. Let's go ahead and cut the excess. And there we go. Now we got our slip bobber ready to go to mount, or I should say tie, on our jig. Then the last thing we need to do is just tie our hook on. In this case we're using a green and yellow jig with a red and black eye. I'm going to use the Palomar knot again here. Now we got the jig on. We're just going to gently pull each side here. Make sure we got a nice tight connection. And then we will use our fingernail clipper, toenail clipper, and cut off most of the excess. And there we have it. We got the jig on the line. So let's go over our slip bobber. We have our tie followed by our bead. That was the first thing we did. Then we put on our wobble bobber for slip bobber. If we go down the line, we have our swivel, and that is tying our braid to our monofilament. And then here at the end we have our jig, or in this case a hook if you're going to be doing something different. But this jig here adds weight, so we don't need to add anything. So that is how you rig up a slip bobber. Thank you guys for watching my video here on how to set up a slip bobber when you're using braid on a spinning reel. I really do hope that you guys try this out and basically give feedback back to me on how you like it. If there's any type of different methods that you use, feel free to comment that down below. I would like to try different methods with slip bobber. I've just found that this is probably my favorite, my easiest way to do it. And if there's other ways, I'd like to hear from you. So also guys, if you want to watch this slip bobber in action, go ahead and watch this video. I'm gonna put it somewhere around here, so go ahead and watch this. We had a great day of fishing the other day, fishing for some smallmouth and walleye. This is a great method of fishing, guys. Definitely don't overlook slip bobbers. So also like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.